Department of Education, Division of Food and Nutrition webinar on performance-based reimbursement. I'm Elaine McDonald, coordinator of Project PA and moderator for today's webinar. Let's start by just reviewing a few simple logistics. We'll have a presentation today followed by a question and answer session. You can submit your questions through the chat box on the left-hand side of the screen. If you just type into the little box at the bottom of the chat box and hit enter, your question will appear. Feel free to type in your questions at any point during the webinar. You don't have to save them until the end, and we will collect the questions and then address them to the presenters at the end. You can download today's slides in handout format from the file share box in the upper right-hand corner of the webinar screen. And today's webinar will be recorded and posted. Okay, getting into the webinar presentation. Our presenter today from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Division of Food and Nutrition, is Vonda Cook, State Director of Child Nutrition Programs. Diane DeBullis, Nutrition Education and School Nutrition Program Supervisor, is also joining us today and may chime in during the Q&A session at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Vonda to begin.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As you're aware, the new meal standards went into effect July 1, 2012. Diane, her staff, and field services did a wonderful job of providing trainings around the state. Because the performance-based reimbursement, which we'll talk about today in detail, is optional, there's confusion that the meal standards are optional. So one of the things we want to start out by hoping that everybody understands is that the new meal standards are not optional. They did go into place as of July 1, 2012. And beginning the first day of school, all schools are expected to work towards implementing the new meal standards. When a school is certified as meeting the new meal standards, they become eligible to receive what is referred to as performance-based reimbursement for each lunch that is served. In the 2012-13 school year, this performance-based reimbursement equals 6 cents per lunch meal served, and this will be adjusted annually by the same inflation factor that is used to adjust other meal reimbursements. Now, you may hear this referred to as the 6 cent reimbursement. We're really trying to stay away from that language because, as I just explained, it's not always going to be 6 cents since it's going to be adjusted annually. So we're really trying to get into the habit of calling it the performance-based reimbursement. The funding for performance-based reimbursement becomes available October 1, and that will run continuously after that as long as it's written in law. So while it starts on October 1 this year, that's only because the federal fiscal year begins October 1. It is funded from October through September. So therefore, when we start the 2013-14 school year, the funding will be available at the beginning of the school year opposed to having to wait till October 1. It's just because it's a brand new program and the federal funding for this is new, so it starts on the beginning of the federal fiscal year cycle. Each school food authority throughout the nation is responsible for determining, each state agency throughout the nation is responsible for determining the process that will be used in the respective states. USDA provided parameters, which we'll review today. They provided 3 acceptable approaches for state agencies to use. The first one is a nutrient analysis. The second one is a simplified nutrient assessment. And the third one is through an on-site review process. Once we open up the certification process and a school food authority requests certification, as a state agency, we have 60 days to review and certify or decline the certification. Along with the request for certification, the school food authority must submit an attestation statement. Basically, that attestation statement will say that as a school food authority, you're continuously following the meal standard, and that the information submitted for certification is representative and reflective of the fact that all meal standards are being followed. We will provide you this statement as soon as we're ready to roll out our process, and that statement will need to be signed. It is That attestation statement is going to be necessary through the 2014-15 school year, which is when the new review process, the new administrative review process, which we'll talk about in, towards the end of the presentation, is well underway. We are required, as part of the certification process, we're required to review both breakfast and lunch menus for certification if a school serves breakfast. And we are required to look at the menus for each specific age grade group and distinct menus within each age group. So, for example, if you have 4 elementary schools in your LEA or school food authority, and they're K-5 buildings, and they all follow the same menu, we would only need to look at one K-5 menu. But if 2 of the elementary schools use one menu and the other 2 elementary schools use a different menu, we're required to look at the 2 different K-5 menus. This applies to middle schools and high schools as well. When we start accepting requests for certification, you'll be able to send us a menu for the current month or 1 month preceding your request, but no earlier than the October menu. So if you request certification in October, you'll send us 1 week of October menus and the necessary documentation. If you request certification in December, you can submit a week for December or a week for November. The menus for both breakfast and or lunch, again, it's dependent on if your school food authority serves breakfast in all of the buildings or some of the buildings. But if your breakfast and or lunch menus must meet the current requirements. So since the only requirements for breakfast in the 2012-13 school year is the milk requirement, breakfast menus would follow the old meal standards, so the meal standards that you've been using over the last couple years for breakfast, except milk must be 1% plain or non-fat, plain, or flavored, and a variety of milk must be offered. For certification, we are required to look at the food components and subcomponents, which is in the case of the vegetables. We're also required to look at quantities of foods being planned, calories, and saturated fat. Certification applies to the entire LEA or the school district. It's an all or nothing thing. So either all of the buildings meet the required criteria, or none of them get certified. Once a school food authority is certified, they'll be eligible to receive the performance-based reimbursement. This will function through pairs as the regular reimbursement does, and it follows the same rules of being submitted with your monthly claim. PAIRS is being modified right now to capture this information and calculate the performance-based reimbursement along with the claim. Once certified as being eligible for the performance-based reimbursement, that goes retroactive to the first day of the month. So if you requested certification in October and we approved that certification, the performance-based reimbursement goes retroactive to October 1. Even if the menu you submitted was for the 3rd week in October, the performance-based reimbursement would be effective with the first day of the month, which would be October 1. If you request certification in January by submitting December menus, the performance-based reimbursement is effective January 1 if we certify the school. So it's always the beginning of the month of which you requested certification. So if you submit menus that are 1 month preceding the day that you're requesting certification, it is all dependent on the month in which you're requesting certification, not the week of the menus. If you already submitted a claim and it has been paid while you're awaiting certification, You'll be able to, once you've been notified that you can, that you've been certified, you'll be able to revise your claim, and it will recalculate and pay the difference. So once certified, the performance-based reimbursement can be turned off if it is determined that a school food authority is not meeting the new meal requirements. And this on and off switch will be here within the Division of Food and Nutrition. It's not an on and off switch that the school food authority will have access to. We're required to conduct on-site validation reviews at 25% of the school food authorities that we certify. All large school food authorities must be validated. That is any school food authority with an enrollment of 40,000 students or more. All other validation reviews are at a random selection. And we will announce the validation reviews prior to arriving. We must validate that the school food authority is meeting the new requirements from the beginning of the certification period. We must observe a meal service for each menu type that is certified. We must review the production records for that day and for the time of certification. So if you request certification in October, and we certify you beginning the month of October, then when we come out to do a validation review, if you're one of the 25% of the school food authorities selected, we come out to do a validation review. We'll be looking, and let's say we come out in February, we'll be looking at your current meal service, but we'll also be looking at we'll be looking at records from back in October to make sure that they're consistent with consistent with following the meal patterns, but also that there's some consistency in what we were able to observe on the day of the review. Our goal is to provide as much technical assistance as possible in order for everyone to be successful. However, if the school food authority is not meeting the requirements, and if problems can be corrected easily, if the problems can't be corrected easily, or if the problems are extensive, then we can remove the certification to the performance-based reimbursement. So therefore, we would turn off the certification for the school food authority, and the school food authority would need to reapply for certification at that point. Depending on the extent of the problems, we can reclaim the 6 cents back to the time of certification. Administrative reviews are kind of the new terminology we're using for what was the CRE SMI reviews. So we do have the option to defer administrative reviews that are scheduled for the 2012-13 school year to the 2013-14 school year, except we must conduct additional administrative reviews and follow-up reviews. As you may be aware, the 5-year review cycle is being condensed to a 3-year cycle, and this is also a result of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. The first year of the 3-year cycle will be in the 2013-14 school year. In the first year of the new 3-year review cycle, we will be required to review anyone that was scheduled for a review in the 12-13 school year but not reviewed. Anyone not certified will also need to be reviewed early in the 3-year review cycle. During an administrative review, if we need to take fiscal action because the new meal standards are not being met, for lunch, that fiscal action would or could be the standard fiscal action, which is the federal and state reimbursement, plus the performance-based reimbursement. We're now also required to look at breakfast as part of the administrative review. Since there is no performance-based reimbursement associated with breakfast, just the standard fiscal action would apply. And I want to add that we're not, the whole review process is actually being reinvented right now. So during the 12-13 school year, we'll actually be learning about what the new administrative review process will look like. we're not sure how much resemblance it will have between to the old process, and we're frequently asked, where is my review going to fall into the new 3-year review cycle? And quite honestly, we have no way of knowing where anyone's review is going to fall until we get through this current school year, the 12-13 school year. Because as I described, it depends on who requests certification and who doesn't request certification. One thing we do know is that if a school is scheduled to be reviewed in the 12-13 school year and they're not reviewed, we do know that they will be in the first year of the review cycle. Before we move on, I just want to briefly mention the legalistic aspects of the certification, the performance-based reimbursement. If we deny certification for a school food authority, that action is not appealable. And so when I say appealable, I don't mean that you can't. I don't mean that you can't call us and discuss it with us, and that's more technical assistance. When we say appeals, it's a very formal process that eventually goes through a judge. But if we deny certification, that action is not appealable. However, if a school food authority was certified and we remove that certification, or we turn it off, or we stop it, that action is appealable along with any fiscal action that we take. All right, now moving on to the process that Pennsylvania will use for certification. So as I had mentioned in the beginning, every state agency throughout the nation is responsible for identifying their own process that it will use for certification. And USDA provided parameters that we have to stay within. We're still in the planning stages of determining what our exact process will be. So you might be saying, how in the world can you still possibly be in the planning stages when it's mid-August right now? Unfortunately, that's because there are many things that are out of our control at this point. We do know that we would prefer not to use the USDA certification tool, and we had sent out an email a couple weeks ago because we didn't necessarily want schools wasting their time completing the certification tool when that's not something that when it's something that we know that we prefer, that we do not want to use at this point. It's a very complex Excel tool. So if you're familiar with Excel, it's easier to navigate than if you're not familiar with Excel. Nevertheless, whether you're familiar with Excel or not familiar with Excel, it is a complex tool. So we don't want school food authorities necessarily wasting their time or utilizing their time, maybe not wasting it, but utilizing their time entering information onto a certification tool that we may not be using. Any other process besides the USDA certification tool that a state agency wishes to use must be approved by USDA. And at this point, nothing has been approved by USDA. We are being told it is a very high priority for them. But at this point, there is no tool or software company that has been certified by USDA. So until we have that information, it makes it very difficult for us to proceed with planning anything at all. I can tell you that we would like to use a web-based statewide menu planning system that will allow menus, product information, and recipes to be shared across the state. And it will also provide standardized production records and nutrient analysis for school food authorities. That software, nor any other software, has been approved at this point. So we can't even say how we will be able to proceed. Because there's many school food authorities that already use a nutrient analysis software for their menu planning, that they may have used this product for years. And we're not even sure at this point if if those items will be, if those softwares or tools will be approved by USDA for the certification process. So until we have know what those approvals are, it's very difficult for us to move forward, because we would like to make some contingencies for schools that are already using a nutrient analysis software system, and they've already entered those menus. But again, until we know what's approved from USDA, it's very difficult for us to move forward and be able to say what we'll accept and completely identify our process. Regardless of the method that we go, even if we need to use the USDA certification tool, and I say that need because we really don't want to have to use the certification tool because of the complexities associated with it. We want to be able to provide small group menu planning assistance for school food authorities, just to provide that reassurance of that they are understanding the new meal standards correctly, and that they are planning their menus appropriately in accordance with the new meal standards. Earlier, I mentioned that our goal is for everyone to succeed at meeting these new meal standards, and we'll provide as much technical assistance as we possibly can. We will likely supplement our current staff to assist with the technical assistance, the certification, and the validation reviews. And as soon as we can provide more specific information on the actual process, we will do so. In all of our planning that we do, we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be to successfully implement the new meal standards. Because if we want everybody to win in this process, because ultimately the outcome is that the students will win.